Picture your ancestor living in the wild. His neighbors were saber-toothed tigers and rattlesnakes that would kill him from a single bite. For him, tomorrow was never guaranteed. The odds of survival were massively stacked against him. But he still managed to survive though. And not only did he survive, he was able to procreate and ensure the survival of his offsprings. The proof of this is you sitting where you are right now, watching a video that's talking about him. So how did he do it? Well, a specific brain system made sure he had the motivation to eat, a motivation that's far greater than the fear of stepping out of his hut. This brain system also made sure he had the drive to have sex, a drive that's far greater than the fear of dying. This brain system that ensured he doesn't go extinct is known as the reward system. The reward system secretes dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter of pleasure and anticipation. This neurotransmitter tells his brain that when he eats and has sex, no matter the difficulty he had to overcome to do any of those things, he would feel pleasure, and that this pleasure would be worth the sacrifice. So he goes after that deer with reckless abandon. He does everything he can to be an eligible mate that a maiden would pick to procreate with. The habits of eating and procreating are also naturally reinforced in the reward system. This means doing them release immense dopamine in his brain, so that when he does them, he'll want to do them again and again and again, till he starts binging on them. Let's fast forward to the world we, his descendants, live in today. A world where highly processed, high-caloric foods and adult contents are literally available at the click of a button. A world where we don't have to hunt for the food we eat, where we don't have to do anything to be rewarded with pictures and videos of naked girls in high quality. The problem here is that as useful as our reward system is, our brain isn't evolved to handle this level of availability of dopamine-inducing substances and activities of today's world. Because in a single night, you see naked parts that's far more than what your ancestor will see in his entire life. So, of course, you'll binge on these heavy doses of dopamine source. And as you binge, you start building tolerance to this high level of dopamine because your dopamine receptors start reducing. So for any act that would mimic the two fundamental naturally reinforced habits, there's a high tendency to become really addicted to it. And these acts over time make you numb to the little pleasures of life that makes you happy and makes life worth living. In this video, I'll talk about 6 bad dopamine habits that you indulge in that floods your brain with unhealthy levels of dopamine and as a result are already affecting your dopamine receptors in a negative way. And these habits are in the order of how naturally they're reinforced and how addictive they can become. Habit number 1: jerking off. This is one of the most destructive pathology of today's generation. A lot of guys are indulging in this habit, and they don't even know it's affecting their dopamine pathways in a very, very bad way. Nothing is inherently wrong with jerking off per se, but because it mimics the act of procreating, our brain can't tell the difference between having real sex and jerking off. So the act releases huge amount of dopamine, and you start binging on it. This is where you start building dopamine tolerance and your dopamine receptors reduce. And this is where things start going south. Because you eventually become desensitized to real sex. You become desensitized to the boring parts of a relationship. You start objectifying females. You might develop erectile dysfunction. You start needing to watch more and more hardcore content. You start watching content that's the complete opposite of your sexual orientation. You start wasting hours of your life that you'd rather spend productively elsewhere jerking off. And to top it all, you become desensitized to anything boring, and you just don't want to do it, as nothing else will seem enjoyable if you aren't locked in your room jerking off. Apart from the fact that fapping can be highly addictive, to quit is a different ballgame entirely. If you've found yourself already addicted to this bad dopamine habit and want to quit, here's a video up here where I detailed the best strategy for quitting. Also, you should know that this channel is dedicated to helping you achieve the highest ordeal any human being can strive for, and that's becoming the best version of yourself that you can be. A version that's devoid of compulsive dopamine-seeking behavior that can hinder your growth. Subscribe to this channel, turn on the notification button so you won't miss more informative and educational content like this one. Habit number 2: consuming too much sugar or highly processed foods. This is the other side of the natural reinforcing habits coin. Because your body is naturally wired to eat today, like there'll be a food-wiping apocalypse tomorrow. It wants to store as high calorie as it can. So when we consume highly processed food that has unnatural high calories or foods high in sugar, dopamine is released in our nucleus accumbens. And if you're not careful, you tend to start binging on these sugary and high-caloric foods to chase the high feeling that the dopamine gives you. Because these highly processed foods and high-sugar beverages are so far away from their natural state, they cause several damages to our bodies on a cellular level. They are the leading cause of obesity, high blood pressure, brain fog, and other health problems. But because of the dopaminergic reward we receive from consuming these types of foods, we often find it difficult to stop, even though we know they're not good for our health. To stop consuming these types of food if you're already hooked on them, it's more practical to phase them out gradually from your diet and substitute them with something healthy like fruits. Habit number 3. Excessive gambling. I believe we don't talk about this bad dopamine habit enough in today's society. This won't apply to everybody, but this is another habit that releases huge amount of dopamine when you do it. It can be highly addictive and can mess with your dopamine pathway. Why gambling releases huge amount of dopamine is because it's tied to making money by exerting little to no effort. And making money is directly integral to our survival in today's world. When you've placed your bets, the anticipation of the win releases huge dopamine, and that's the feeling that you chase over and over again. The higher the potential return, the higher the dopamine released. Gambling addiction isn't as talked about as alcoholism or drug addiction, but its side effects are as catastrophic. I've met people with gambling addiction that don't even know they have an addiction, and I've seen firsthand how the addiction takes over their lives. It erodes their life savings and alienates them from the people they love. So if you like to take a punt or two at one time or the other, you should be watchful and make sure it doesn't escalate into a full-blown addiction. And if you are already addicted to gambling, you should strongly consider seeking help by talking to therapists that specialize in helping people break the addiction. Habit 4. Excessive video gaming. Video gaming has been confirmed by the research to also release huge dopamine because of the false sense of adventure it offers. It can be highly addictive and start making the gamer waste valuable time chasing that next gear upgrade. This can lead to the gamer putting off more important things to play games instead. Gaming is an interesting tool to use to have fun and pass time if you're into it, but it should be in moderation, so that the dopamine you get from it doesn't become addictive. Habit number 5. Excessive media. The average person today wastes hours of their lives consuming media, either in the form of social media, movies, TV shows on Netflix, and so on. Today's media is programmed in a way that always leaves you wanting more. These media sources have you binging on that next episode, scrolling and clicking on that next post, and taking away your precious time and attention. And this is a sign that dopamine is being secreted in an unhealthy way. Just like video games, media consumption in moderation and a much more educational way should be the goal you strive for. Habit number 6. Drugs and alcohol consumption. This habit goes without saying that it spikes dopamine levels unnaturally, and it includes all classes of drugs, cigarette, weed, cocaine, and alcohol. They can reduce the dopamine receptors in the brain, which has devastating effects in the long term. Aside from the bad dopamine habits that we just discussed, there are some good dopamine habits that can make your life much better, make you happier, and much more motivated. These healthy dopamine habits are so mundane and so easy to do, and they'll make tremendous positive difference on your life. Here's a video up here detailing what those healthy dopamine habits are, and some of them will come as a surprise to you. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.